Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Cason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So Joel, we were just doing our usual pre-show chat about quantum physics and all kinds of stuff and getting ourselves wired up for what's always a fun time because we get to have fun when we're doing this. I mean, there's a lot of different directions I can think of to go. We were sharing some of the things going on in our lives, and we could probably tap into one of those. But they're kind of coming together in my mind to come to one particular point, which is we as humans are in a place in our timeline where so much is happening, and so many people are confused about it and trying to deal with it and doing it from so many different perspectives that it's almost to the point where a lot of us don't even know what the others are talking about. You know what I mean? There's plenty of disconnect that goes on in society, but one of the big ones is as we deal with all these issues, these things moving so quickly, AI development and technology and what's going on with the economy and all the stuff that's going on. Everybody has vastly different perspectives on it, and they can't understand everybody else's perspective.
And I think the number one problem in society today is the inability to accept another's perspective. It creates a lot. I have a vast, a very diverse friend group of all different backgrounds, and I see a lot of their posts on Facebook. The reality to one side is not a reality to the other. So right. It used to be we were sort of I mean, back as a child, a little bit of the news that I knew, you would see all the news stations report basically the same thing. There might be a little bit. And then there was an agreement on here's the facts of what happened today, and it was verified. And then as time has gone on, there's, somewhere in politics along the way, there's a thing called alternative facts or whatever. It's just, yeah. And then, but not to get into political stuff, but just each camp really believes that, or each group, and it can be broken down into multiple groups, that we don't accept a narrative that's the same. And that's not necessarily bad. I mean, one of the things we were talking about right before the show is about your perspective creates your reality. The problem is, from my view only, is when you only allow one perspective to narrate your world, then you become sort of isolated from the information, and that's one of the reasons I don't watch any of the news. Is every news station that you can watch, they all have a bias, not necessarily as obvious as a lot of people would think, but choosing which stories to report and not report. What, like breaking news on one channel is not mentioned on the other channel, because it doesn't match their narrative. And just like in the problems of our country economically, we have very polar opposite people in economic stack, where they're at in life with that. So there's a lot of blame. There's a lot, and that's one of the things that's always fearful with politics is when you divide the people, then it becomes very chaotic. And I'm not even from a political standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, I really believe that this is the highest level of anxiety in general that I've ever seen in my lifetime. I understand, back in the day, there's a lot of divisiveness too, but in my lifetime, this is, as divided as I've ever seen our country. It's just, it's again, in my lifetime. And so it's just, I think a lot of that, and why it all matters is because the law of attraction, it goes on how you feel. So if you're feeling that everything's falling apart and this is chaotic, and then that's going to be what you attract more of. That's what your reticular activating system is filtering for, and that becomes, unfortunately, it becomes your reality. Not because it is reality; it's just what your perspective is dictating.
And there's so many different areas of life where this kind of dichotomy happens. I mean, you mentioned politics. I was mentioning what happens with economics. We both mentioned economics, the economy, but it happens in families. I mean, families have had issues for years. I mean, you know that you're a therapist, a former therapist, a coach. You've had to deal with that kind of thing. I would venture to say, though, that the problems that existed in families, they're still there. They're just more spread apart Is that a way of describing it? Like the division has gotten wider.
The the wider division, and also a more it's more acceptable now than ever of people leaving families.
Mm,
There's the idea that uh, the divorce rate still remains high, but also different than before. The people getting married is drastically lower. The people having children is drastically lower.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to sound like an alarmist, because just because something's different doesn't mean it's terrible. But the traditional family, there's a lot of people say, I just don't want the drama that comes with that. I know so many people that have, when I say left their family, it's not a formal declaration of divorce or anything like that. They just step away from their family. They don't really interact with their family. I know a lot of families that, especially as as time's gone on, when the grandmother dies, the family sort of drift apart. The gatherings stop, and it's just it's a different world. And I think because we're connected in different ways now than we used to be. There's a connectivity through social media. People's jobs have become a really connecting place. So I think we have different definitions of families popping up, but it's a disconnect in the biological family in many cases.
We've also talked quite a bit about how the society has become extremely strongly oriented toward blame, toward entitlement, toward, you know, to put it in mild terms, just not being willing to accept responsibility for your own crap.
Yes.
It's a thing. It really is. It's a big thing. And it seems to have grown as well, to the point where, like, I can think of a few people that I know who are going through various kinds of problems. I can think of one person who was telling me how she was really frustrated that she doesn't have regular contact with family anymore. And in the next breath, she's telling me about how all of her family have treated her so badly.
Yes.
Not because they're out of connection, but because of how they treated her when they were in connection.
Yes.
And there's no apparent consideration of, an irony. I don't know how else to say it.
Well, the
And that's just
you
one example. I mean, I've been encountering a lot of examples. People just not having the wherewithal, the willingness, whatever it is, to recognize that there's a dichotomy going on in their own thought processes and their own belief about, life, the universe, and everything, about their relationships with the people who are close, they're not close. There's like a growing inability to just face, here's my role in the whole thing.
Well, I've always, I believe in a concept called radical responsibility, where I immediately get to the point, what's my role in anything? I will take responsibility. There's things that happen that are out of my control I didn't do, but ultimately my response to those things quickly become my responsibility solely, nobody
Mhm.
else's. So there's a situation in my life in the last couple of years that I could easily view myself as being wrong.
Hmm.
It was just something that I won't get into on the show, but I could feel I was wronged.
Okay.
And my response to that is, yes, the other person, to me, did me wrong, but I also participated on some level. Even I should have been, there's some signs that I should have seen. And I stayed around longer than I should have. I've been
Mm.
involved longer than I should have. So my role was, yeah, I should have saw that, moved on. And, I don't, and this is someone that there was never any closure, any shut, none of that. So it was one of those things that I just have to accept my role in it. I don't know exactly what happened. It was very confusing. I had to let go of all that. And that was part of the process, because I was never going to get an answer. And even if I were to get an answer, it wouldn't be any accepting of responsibility. It would just
Right.
simply be, their perception of what I did wrong. And I don't want to do that. And it's been a while now, and I wouldn't even entertain talking about it now, because I have moved on. But it's
Sure.
this idea that, and you see a lot of this on, the great, the value of the internet and social media and connection on one side is great, but you get a lot of reinforcement. If you were to go onto TikTok right now and just put in narcissistic spouse,
Yeah.
there are going to be 100,000 videos pop up from therapists to life coaches to just people talking. And so what happens is when you feel you're wronged, then you can go on social media and get supported and reinforced in being wronged and never really ask, what did you do in it?
Mm.
Because it'll just support your view. Oh, he's bad. If he really wanted to be with you, he would be with you. There's a lot of therapists, that says, if he wanted to, he would. And so that reinforces that concept. That's not a wrong statement per se, but the statement doesn't take into account the other side.
And that's just it, because we don't take in the other side. We don't.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, one of the best things that happened to me in terms of doing this podcast is how I've really been exposed to literally hundreds, I would even say thousands of different perspectives over the last 14 years. And I value that almost more than anything else in my life. It's really that high. I also, though, recognize how my experience is pretty unusual. I mean, there aren't many people doing podcasts these days anyway. Yeah, there are some, yeah, but by comparison to the overall population, it's a pretty small percentage. Um, and I don't have access to large numbers of people, so I don't know how many other people are discovering the value of different perspectives in their lives. There probably are quite a few. All I know is that amongst the people I know outside of the podcast, it's it's a scarce phenomenon. I mean, the few that I encounter, they become good friends because, like, oh, okay, I just found somebody who's in my tribe, like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's almost that rare. It's astonishing.
Well, and I, to me, I am fascinated by people's. Well, first of all, I'm fascinated by people,
Mhm.
and I just love to hear what people say. But some of my favorite people, like I met a guy at this not conference, at an event that I was at, and it was he wasn't there. He was there with his wife, and it was a neuroscience lecture,
Mm.
and so. Basically, I speak to everybody. So I went up to get some water, and we're standing there. I said, "Oh, are you in the field?" And he goes, "No, I actually am a botanist or something like that. One of those." And I said, "Okay." And he started. I don't forget the name of what they're called. I call them roly polies. The little things that are in the dirt that roll up when you pull them out. The little
Oh, okay. Yeah.
bugs. You know what roly polies are?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so he started talking to me about roly polies.
Okay.
And I had no idea what roly polies do. They do incredible work for it. They
Okay.
support this. I mean, they can remove toxic crap from the dirt.
Wow.
They're really good at just they enrich the soil, and he knows so much about roly polies. And
Yeah.
they were the all I knew when I was a kid. I would make them roll up because they roll up when they're scared, and I would thump them like little bowling balls. That's what I did when I was a kid. So I didn't think they were any more valuable than that, but it turns out they're very important to the ecosystem. They're really important, and they're great for the soil. And so why I'm telling the story is not about roly polies, but there's so many people out there with just stuff, passion, things they're into. And now I'm not going to change my focus on that. The guy didn't want to hear about my neuroscience or quantum theory stuff,
Mhm.
but he really loved telling me about those roly polies. And I was
Mhm.
fascinated, not necessarily by the roly polies, which by the way are they're fast, but just how passionate a man could be about roly polies. And when I say that, it sounds silly. I wish I knew the name of what the bug was, but I just described it. We weren't calling them roly polies in our discussion. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it's such a cool thing to see, and there's just so much out there. So that's what I'm really fascinated with people about, and I'm encouraged by the diversity of all that. I like the fact that one of my things I've talked to I know I love the idea of discussing like waste management and creating desalination plants and stuff like that with different people. Not because I'm ever going to do anything in the field, but it's just information that it's like I go forward looking on problems. We're having one day we're going to run out of fresh water. So I think possibly that's one of the things say. So what I think that's a big problem if we do. So
I would say.
so we have unlimited water in the oceans, but it's not fresh. So we know how to do desalination now, but we don't know how to do it efficiently. We're not good at it. So I would love for our energy to be our mindset to be focused on that. That's the stuff we should be looking at because in 100 years, that's going to be a problem, and we need something really efficiently to do that. So I look at those kind of things, and with fascination study all that. Nope, I'm not expecting anybody else to do that, but I'm just talking about the individual person with the different perspectives and what they're into. I know people that are into music theory even and talking about it's stuff that not remotely interested in, but stuff that I find fascinating that they are so into it.
And I think I sense that because I know music theory is something I'm very interested in, and I've never brought it up with you, and I really had no intention of bringing it up with you
Well,
because I
and
could
I
tell it was just
appreciate
not
that.
something you wanted.
I appreciate that because I would probably, as your friend, I could probably extend my attention span on that from 3 seconds to 10. But
I hear you.
yeah,
Yes. This is making me think of something. As you know, I don't spend very much time. I spend about as much time on social media as I spend on the news, which is, pretty minimal. Um, but I did. I was on Facebook, I think it was, and I got one of these ads popped up, and it was supposedly an ad for a venture where they're trying to offer an equivalent to TikTok. I should say I'm using the word equivalent loosely because it really isn't a TikTok. It's the same kind of medium as a TikTok.
right.
But in their particular case, what they're trying to do is they're trying to feed to you only videos that help you to expand your mind, to expand your knowledge, to give you all kinds of interesting stuff to work on building your mindset. A lot of the stuff that we talk about that was in their list of things that you could gain from it. And honestly, I was a little skeptical of it, but I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I hit the button, and I was there's no other word for it. I was subjected to a long series of questions. Do you like this better or that better? What do you think is, it's like a Rorschach test with 500 screens or something like that. What do you see in this? It was that kind of thing. I got about, I don't know, 20, 30 screens into it before I finally realized this is going to go on for a long time. And I
Yeah.
really lost interest. And so I walked away from it. But as I walked away from it, I'm thinking to myself, they really don't trust my perspective at all. They're trying everything they can to make sure I have exactly the right perspective to match what it is they're putting out there. I thought
Well, and
that's kind of sad.
Well, it is, and I'm not in any way defending TikTok, but I will tell you this. TikTok's algorithm does that for you. See, all
Automatically.
this, my TikTok's different than most people's TikTok because I have
Yeah.
nothing but neuroscientists and law of attraction and I mean, there's nothing popping up my TikTok beyond that. Their algorithm is amazing. When I have that and some weightlifting occasionally popping in because I look at some of those things too. But I'm not on TikTok much. But that might be the best algorithm that I've ever seen because
Yeah.
I am filtered with neuroscientists and stoicism and those things. It found my interest without having to go through a 30-page questionnaire. So it's going to be hard. And again, I'm not defending TikTok because it has some wacky stuff and a lot. There,
Oh yeah.
uh, but it's just that's the point to me is when you hear stuff like that, that would be a good idea. But doing it by getting some basic answers and then adjusting the algorithm about what you look at would have been the way to do it. Trust your
Oh yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, I don't when I use the phrase loosely when I said that they're trying to make it like TikTok. About the only thing that's like TikTok is that it was videos on a phone. Beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot that was similar.
Okay. Okay. Right.
But nevertheless, there was at least that similarity. But what you're talking about is actually, like you said, it's one of the strengths of TikTok. It's very, very good at isolating what your particular interests are and then feeding you those interests. It's really good at that. I was astonished at how bad the imitator was at that. And
Yeah.
again, I think it's for the same reason we've been talking about, that they literally can't handle any perspective other than their own.
Yeah.
And and again, these are people who are talking about things that you and I talk about all the day. We talk about mindset. We talk about growth, working on yourself. All that. That's the kind of stuff they want to talk about, but they can't get anybody in there who is thinking about anything else.
One of the things that you and I've talked about, we may have mentioned this on the show, is uh, I don't know, several years ago, I used to join all the law of attraction groups on Facebook
Mm.
and quickly realized the worst application of law of attraction is in the law of attraction Facebook group. It's arguing. I just you can't say anything without negative feedback. It's the weirdest thing that I've ever seen, and I'm like, oh, I just left every group because I'm not saying everyone's that way, but I haven't found one that it was just oh my goodness, it was so odd because you would think a law of attraction group would be exactly in my wheelhouse since that's sort of my long life journey on that. But I found it the least it was not doing what it should have been doing.
I'm with you 100%. I've had very much the same experience. I haven't left all of them. I think there's like one that I'm still in because I see it pop up every once in a while. And it's mainly because the group is trying to use humor as a way to raise vibration all the time. So like, okay, yeah, I can go with that.
I go with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's about it. Like you, I left them all because there was no point in staying in them.
But
And part
yeah,
of it again is this what we're talking about. They couldn't handle alternative perspectives.
because when you go into these things, like you have, I always tell people my version of the law of attraction. The way I say that is this is what has worked for me,
Mm,
my version. I have never ever believed for 1 second that I'm going to sit on my couch and manifest $1 million. I, it, I now has anybody ever done that? Likely, probably. I didn't because my belief system wouldn't allow that to do. So my version of the law of attraction is to get the right mindset, to envision, to feel what I want, and then take aggressive, intentional action toward that goal.
yeah.
That's how my law of attraction works, and it's works really well for me. So
And to be fair, when we started talking, now we started talking nearly 14 years ago.
yeah,
You were one of the earliest people on my show, and we've been talking ever since then because you've been doing shows with me for 14 years practically. Um, One of the things I think it made it work so well is we had a very similar perspective, so
yes,
it was easy for us.
yes,
But there were differences too. I mean, there were definite differences in perspective. And I think I won't speak for you, I'll say it for me. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to continue to do the shows with you because I didn't always agree with your perspective. I usually did, but I didn't always agree with it. But I
correct.
liked it when I disagreed because when I disagreed, you had some pretty good stuff. And I'm like, okay, I
Well,
like this different perspective.
but I love other perspective. I love to see other people's stuff. I always, I believe the to define being humble is to be teachable. If you want to be,
Mhm.
if you're humble, you're teachable, and I always want to be teachable. You and I, in the beginning days, we fought so hard for the law of attraction to figure it out. We worked so hard on it. It was,
We did.
and we did the vision boards, we did all those things, and the different things, and none of those are, I'm not making fun of any of those could be great tools to help you sort of get to where you want to be, but the understanding for me as it went on, is I found what works for me, and it works really well. You've witnessed this over the years. It works really well for me, and I'm comfortable with it. I like it, and I'm also open to people who feel differently. I just
Mhm.
don't feel I need to defend it with me or argue it with other people. It's just because I do believe that the whole thing is your belief system tied into your emotions, that what you're going to bring about. So my version from the beginning did not have any luck. Like, let's I need that $1 million to knock on the door today. It just never felt like there was a possibility of that happening. But there was a wow opportunity leading to this, leading to that. That became magical.
I love how you emphasized one point as you were going through that, which is you didn't need to prove it to anybody else. You didn't need to have anybody else believe in what you believed in or anything like that, which is exactly how you develop the mindset of appreciating other perspectives.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that going on, you're going to have a hard time appreciating somebody else's perspective.
Well,
Because every time you encounter a different perspective, you're going to measure it against that standard.
and that's so sometimes people think when somebody has another opinion or a different perspective or whatever, some people take that as a personal assault against them.
Right.
So I have different religious beliefs than a lot of my friends. I am in no way bothered by that. I'm not intimidated by that. I'm not upset by that. I've never tried to talk one of my friends out of their religious beliefs. Whatever works for them is absolutely great. But I'm fascinated by those who try to talk me out of my beliefs
Yeah.
because they're so adamant that their belief is the right one
Mhm.
and only one. And so I'm very much like I'm glad it works for you, but this works for me.
That statement is probably the best statement I've heard, certainly all week, probably all month, maybe even longer, about how you maintain a healthy perspective about perspectives.
Yeah,
Right there. That's how you do it.
yeah. It's when people get so invested and they're so overall just stuck on one concept, you get very narrow minded. And also, I'm very aware. So the way my brain works, I have my world.
Mhm.
One of the reasons I love other perspective is I readily know that there's multiple answers to questions. And
Mm.
I've always said I'd love to have the perspective of an 8-year old and an 80-year-old.
Yeah.
I just love their 8-year-olds. They're so smart, and they have no idea that things can go wrong. So you just ask them, they'll tell you, here's all you got to do. It's like, and they're right. You know,
It's true. It's
it's really
fabulous.
simple.
I mean, it used to be the old joke that if you got a particular toy or something like that, the box would say for ages 12 and up, and the joke that went along with it was there's never a 12-year-old around to explain it to you when you need one.
Exactly, because the perspective of the that I like to look at. I love input. I love how other people get there. I love people that remain calm. I one of the things one of the therapists that I have this office suite, and one of the guys that rents there is a longtime therapist. He's a very sort of old hippie guy, good guy. We're not really close, but I really respect him. Right,
Mhm.
so he the electric bill is in his name.
Okay.
So we all chip in whatever time of month he says you owe this much for the electric bill. So you know me, when I get that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I immediately write a check and I go put it on his desk. I don't know what everybody else does, but I do it the same day,
Hmm.
or the day that I'm in the office next. And I'm fascinated that he may take a month to deposit that check. So if I get a check from a client or anywhere, that is deposited that day because I can do it on my phone anyway. So I respect money a lot. That's how my dad taught me. You don't, if it's a $25 check, you get it in the bank that day. It's just that's my energy toward money. It's I respect it. All the stuff that goes along with that. Two very different perspectives. He does fine. I'm sure. I don't know his financial status, but I'm sure he does fine. He's been doing this forever. But I'll get it in the bank when I'm ready. I'm like, no, it's in the bank today. I am no way judgmental of his version. It's just my version's different. And so I'm fascinated by people, and those are little things, but I always like to see how people conduct business, or, the way I pay my bills is when a bill's due, it gets I electronically pay it the day I get the bill. It doesn't. I don't wait a month till it's due. It gets paid that day. I have an 850 credit score. I work really hard to get all the things. So money and me have a unique. I have a unique relationship with money, and I treat it very respectfully and intentionally. So it's I pay my bills without exception. Other people are, oh yeah, yeah, I'll get to that or whatever. When I used to collect rent, when I was the leaseholder, you know, I might get somebody's check a week after the first.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And but it was something no big deal. I mean, it was fine, but I've always looked at it differently. But whether it's money or it's how you deal with people, uh, I'm fascinated by other people's perspective and behavior. The In no way am I judgmental. I try not to be. I'm not saying I couldn't be, but I try not to be, because I understand my story to getting me to this point in my life had a lot of factors that influence how I behave, and so did they.
Yeah, I get that. And my own approach is actually very much the same as yours. In fact, I can point to something that you'll probably appreciate. Um, as you know, I have a gardening service, and most of the business I conduct gets paid by credit card, but I do get checks occasionally. And like you, I run them through the bank, through the phone, and so forth. I like to get them into the bank as soon as they arrive. I currently have one check that's sitting on my desk that's been here for, I think, about 10 days, because there's a whole story with it, but bottom line is it was an insufficient deposit in advance for doing services, and they hadn't signed an estimate, so the whole thing was kind of delayed. That check makes me so uncomfortable because every day I looked at there, oh, there's that check again.
Yep.
Haven't heard from her. When am I going to hear from her? It just drives me nuts. That
Yep.
never happens with any of the payments that I put into the bank immediately.
Right.
So I get that. But I can also say back when my business crashed and I was struggling to survive and going deep into credit card debt and so forth, my mindset was exactly the opposite because
Yes.
that was how I was attempting to make sense out of the situation I was in. I would try to stress things out as long as I could. I would try. So I had a completely different perspective from the one that I have today. And I think that probably did more than anything else in my life. That kind of experience gave me the appreciation of perspective because I had both the perspectives at different times in my life.
Well, and me too, in particular. There was a time I didn't pay any bill ever.
Yeah.
I would charge having no. I would run those credit cards knowing there's zero chance that's getting paid. Let's ride this thing till they shut it down.
Right.
Yeah, and that was my 20s, and and that didn't end well. But the ultimate ending got really good after that because that
Mm.
was part of the reason I made a decision. That's one of the things I'm never going to do again. So perspective allows you, the flexibility and perspective. You don't have to give up your belief system, but just understand you're not being harmed by another person's perspective. And when you feel your who you are is being attacked by somebody else's view of it, it's really just a subconscious feeling that's not accurate. You're going to be okay, but people that have, again, really deep, extreme religious views, they'll kill you over having a different perspective.
This is true. Yeah.
That's wild to me.
It is wild. It's also kind of, I won't say terrifying because that starts to play into another narrative. I'll say it's very unpleasant.
It
It's
is,
not
and
it's not a happy
it,
thing at all.
and that's that becomes part of the problem. And then so when you look at all that goes on, your perspective of like getting up every day. I'm a big believer that I get up every day. I work on my mindset. I get things together. I go to the gym. I have these routines and my perspective of how I run my life. I have people that will often say, aren't you just tired of this routine? You do the same thing, and I go, I love this routine. It's what keeps me going. I'm not get up, go to the gym, go to work, come home, do my stuff. It's just a wonderful way I live, in my opinion. Other people would be horrified by that. One of my younger version of me would not have liked this version of me.
Isn't that interesting? Your younger version of you would not have liked this version. And particularly interesting in that I think about the circumstances that your younger version was in, and I think about the circumstances that you're in now. Your younger version was basically saying, I want a more miserable life. I mean, that's really what it added up to.
It didn't know that, but yes, that
No.
yeah, yeah. So but what I the how I am with my structure. I talk
Yeah.
about my structure a lot. So having an ADHD brain,
Hmm.
I am appalled initially by structure. It's like forcing me into a box structure.
Okay.
But once I understood how well I function with structure, I have now, even though it's against my basic instinct, it is my solution. It is what allows me to have been as successful I've been able to be. It's how I function my life. It's just I set it up with structure. My Google Calendar from 7 in the morning till 9 at night has something in every spot most days. And I love that. It's no guessing. It's just go do that. Now I could adapt. I can do things. I'm capable of that. But it's just the structure serves me so well. But I fought structure for so long. So a lot of times we fight the things that are most serving of us. But yet there's a tendency, like you're right, that to the outside world, Joel, you're choosing to be miserable with this lifestyle you're living way back in the middle of my addiction. In my life, nobody understood that if once this goes like I see it going, I want to be the happiest person in the world. There was no path to that happening, but I was so stuck on that course that it took everything falling apart hard for me to change that course.
That's a great point because one of the skills involved in learning to appreciate other perspectives is also in your mind and often through conversation, being able to kind of create the scene or create the series of scenes in your mind to see where it's headed to see where
Yes.
it's going to go to. Because if you don't do that, it's a fairly, well, it's a static viewpoint. It's just, you're just two-dimensional in that kind of a viewpoint. You have to add that third dimension of time or fourth dimension, depending on how you want to look at it. Yeah, you have to add that extra dimension of time in order to truly appreciate the perspective that's not your own perspective. If you don't do that, you're not going to get there.
Well, and one of the things that I started looking at, and this is when sort of stoicism started coming into my
Mm.
life, and these different ideas. Uh, One of the first things I had to do is realize this is not working.
Yeah.
This is this I ended up in jail. I lost everything, and came to a decision point. I got to do something different, or I have to die. One of those two. That was pretty much the choice. And in the decision to go forward, part of that was like, okay, I can't do the same game plan that I did before. This gambling idea and all this, So I need to really just totally restructure my brain, and I'm going to go do this. And as I've often talked about, all that was available for me then, it was real simple. There was one choice. It was like go wait tables while you're living in this halfway house. That was the only choice. So it was easy. One choice. I
Nothing
did
to
it,
decide.
stuck with it. That led to other things, that led to other things, that led here. And I have unlimited choices now, and I find them very, very fascinating. But you can get stuck in the choice process too, because there's too many.
That is true. Yeah. It's fascinating to me how, as we were exploring this idea of multiple perspectives in the context that we started with, which is a context of there are so many people who are scrambling and struggling with how disconnected our society seems to be today, how lack of understanding it exists on a massive scale. I mean, it's something that a lot of people struggle with. They don't necessarily know it consciously. They're often doing it unconsciously or subconsciously, but it goes on, and it has a number of effects, many deleterious, many negative effects uh, that include feelings of not only being disconnected, but also feelings of being worthless or of being an imposter or of feeling like you're impotent, like you can't accomplish anything, like there is no hope. And so we're living in a society where people are not only divided by their perspectives, but they're divided in a way that sets themselves up to feel hopeless. That's
Yes.
really astonishing.
Well, and that's the cycle. That's the so when you feel hopeless, then that you lose the ability to understand. There's always an action to take, but hopelessness makes you believe there is no other action. There's nothing I do matters. And I'm a believer in anything you do matters. Any minute action at times. I've seen lives change by getting up and washing the dishes, and that's we talked about that.
Mhm.
So just getting up and taking an action, even if it doesn't even seem to have any remote ability to help, one action leads to another action, which leads to another action. Hope develops and increases because, I've told people, all you need is a hope of a little hope, just something. And the thing is, when people want me to, I'm meeting with people who've lost everything. The world's over. I said the hard part to sell you on this is I cannot tell you what's going to happen. I don't know the path that will unfold. I don't even know how my path happened, so it makes no sense. But it happened. So I just need you to quit worrying about what that end game is or how we get there, and get up and go. What is that? What is that next step? What's the first thing we have to do? You're living in your parents' basement. And they want you out in 2 months. You need to get a job and start saying whatever it is, Waffle House, whatever. It doesn't matter. Get a job, and then we'll work. Once you get that job, we'll work for another job. We'll start taking care of ourselves, and the process builds on itself when we do it that way.
What you're talking about is, well, first of all, one of your favorite topics, which is take action. Having the ability to take action is the best thing we have. But you're also talking about it in the context of taking action leads to understanding a new perspective that you didn't have before.
Yes, absolutely. And so the concept of when you take action, it increases neuroplasticity in the brain. The brain sees things differently from every point of action. You know, I always, you know, I've been in New York City one time and I couldn't find the Empire State Building
Mm,
because I had buildings blocking me from the Empire State Building.
right.
Now, that perspective was, I knew the Empire State Building was there and the direction was there, but I was in the wrong place to see it. It didn't remove the Empire State Building. So when I went up 5 blocks the other way, there's the Empire State Building. I can see it. I'm further away, but now I can see it from it. So your perspective dictates what the lens in which you view the world is developed over time. And once you understand, you have to adjust your location sometimes metaphorically or actually to see a different angle, a different perspective. The one of the techniques that and it's not directly related, but is I haven't used this one in a while, but I'm meeting with a client, real stubborn client, just doesn't want to be there, 16, 17-year old. Uh, and he starts with interrupts me and says, look, I've heard everything you said. This is nothing new. I don't want to do it. And I said, well, tell me how to do it. And I said, I'm not kidding. So I even went as far as said, look, let's change seats. I want
Wow.
you to tell me what I should be doing, because I value your opinion. And he literally, in telling me what I needed to do, he relayed everything that was wrong or going on with him.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, and
That's
I literally
talk
call
about,
that
oh
the
my goodness. I'm getting
yeah,
goosebumps on that one.
yeah. So you change the seat,
Yeah.
and it had an amazing effect on that, because it was, hey, I don't claim to know everything. I want to know what your perspective of. Tell me your perspective. And then when he did, and he became one of my, I mean, I have a lot of successful clients. He did really, really well because, in fact, every session I would sit in the other side of the table, and he would sit in my seat just for a while. It was our joke at that point.
Right.
Uh, but it was a really cool thing because I knew that he was seeing the lens. He's been in multiple therapist offices over the years. His perspective was that I'm saying the exact same thing, which I wasn't, but that was his perspective.
Hmm.
And so when I shifted to him, putting him in power, or him being able to tell me what's really going on by telling me what I needed to do, he opened up in a way he's never opened up before.
I love that. I love that. That is so cool. I mean, basically what you did is you took the old saying about walk a mile in a person's moccasins in order to understand their viewpoint. You took that and you applied it to a therapy session. Like, wow, that's so cool. I love it.
And stuff like that. So I believe in shifting perspective, getting in if you're in an environment, if you're one of these people, kid or adult, that's been in 100 therapist office over your life, and I'm sure you're about to scream every time the therapist says, well, how does that make you feel? It's just you've heard that. That's like, I don't even, that rule, they should strike that forever. That should be never
Right.
said again, ever, allowed, illegal, go to jail. uh, it's terrible. uh, yeah, so, in fact, you're going, where did we even go to school for that question? At this point, it was a relevant question 30 years ago, but damn.
I like that. Where'd you go to school for that one? That's cool.
Remember the young man we always talk about, like when one therapist asked him, how did it make you feel? He goes, my mom died. I'm in foster care. What do you think?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I mean, I am somebody who has come to really appreciate perspective. I love your perspective. I love the perspective of all the guests who've come out of the program, all the co-hosts. I will mention one other thing that I've mentioned many, many times, but I'm going to mention it in this context as well. The thing that continues to blow my mind. I used to get pissed about it. Now I don't get quite so pissed anymore, but I used to get really pissed over the fact that someone would come into the show with a very different perspective from mine. I wouldn't like it, and I would learn from it. That really bothered me for the longest time. Now I make a joke out of it, like, "Oh, it just really pisses me off." But I mean, that's not what I'm actually thinking. But at the time, I really did think that, like, "Oh God, this is horrendous. How could I possibly be learning from this person who's just full of crap?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that, there are sometimes I have mentioned this a few times. I was on a radio show one time, and the lady was a guru, I guess. I don't even know what to call her, former therapist, but she was talking about addiction and depression and anxiety. And so, apparently she didn't read my material and I didn't read her material. So
I guess, yeah.
that wasn't going to go well at some point.
Mm.
So when she asked me, uh, I told her my story. She, oh, that's it. My goodness, you've been through a lot. And she said, what did you do for your depression?
Mm.
And I said, well, the medicine didn't work for me. So I started exercising intensely. I eat well. I meditate. She goes, no, 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 no. What medicine do you take for your depression? And I said, as I said, the medicine didn't work for me. She goes, well, then you're not really depressed. She got offended
Wow.
that I would suggest depression could be hint. I said, I must have misunderstood your question. I thought you asked me what I did for my depression. She said, I did. I said, well, that's what I did. It worked. It's still working. And she said, and her answer was, you must not have been actually depressed then.
Of course not. Yes.
And she said, you probably haven't had much happen in your life.
Whoa.
Yeah. She was angry. She was furious that I would suggest that.
That's an interesting statement I mean, she doesn't know your story. We know your story.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, that's a really interesting statement for her to make.
Yeah. Well, and she ended up basically hanging up on me. So
Wow.
she was so mad. And I was like, I said, okay, I'm not saying you being on medication. She wanted me to discuss the medication side.
Hmm.
And I was saying, first of all, I'm not a doctor. That's not my expertise. I'm
Right.
not saying that there's people that don't need the medication. I can only, since I'm a layman technically in this, I can only speak to my experience and what worked for me. And also what's worked for thousands of my clients over the years. So
Yeah.
again, that's not medical advice. That's just something, if you never stop taking medication, or if a doctor prescribes it, you definitely should do what your doctor tells you. I'm just saying how it worked for me was when I would take Prozac or whatever they gave back then. I'm convinced it didn't do anything. There was no side effects. There was it good or bad. It didn't do anything. I just laughed. I said, this can't be even real. There's nothing in this stuff.
It
It,
is
it,
sugar pill.
yeah, it just didn't have an effect. And so it didn't make me happy, sad, improved, nothing. I felt no different the entire time.
It's fascinating, though, that she was so narrow on her perspective that she could not appreciate a different perspective. And that's
Yeah.
an example of what we're talking about.
Well, and that's what I was talking about. I'm sure, and I know that, but it's when you get so adamant that your opinion is the only way to do it,
Yes.
is when people become miserable and stuck, and they're not seeing the perspective of others. See, I would be fascinated to, because if you there's studies out there. I'm not selling this concept. I've sold it a bunch, but I don't need to sell it tonight.
Well, you can
But
sell one more time. It's okay. We can
yeah.
live with it.
So there's legitimate studies, like within the last 2 years, that exercise, proper nutrition, combination of in a meditation routine are as effective, if not more effective, than medication alone.
Hmm.
Now, medication with therapy and exercise has a very high success rate as well, pretty
Yeah.
much the same as the others. But
Hmm.
the idea that it's only the medication is something that just doesn't play out scientifically.
It doesn't play out scientifically, but from my perspective, the most important aspect to all of this is not whether or not medication is useful, but she wasn't willing to see anything else. It had to be the medication. Anything else was unacceptable.
Well, and that
Astonishing.
yeah, it is, and that's the so when you get stuck on one course of action, all you can defend is one course of action.
Mm.
You totally let go of the bio individuality of every person.
Oh yeah.
So that's one of my biggest things. And there is no way. I don't treat every client the same. I don't have the same approach with every client. I learn my clients. I understand what works for them. I figure out who they are. I use a technique called motivational interviewing in the beginning, and I really get to know them, build a rapport, and then figure out what they respond to best. And then I go that way. If I were to just go approach everybody the same way, there's some clients that need that kick in the ass kind of thing. They really like that energy. Other people need to be very gently handled. I need to figure that out.
Well, some people just need to be asked what their favorite Beatle is.
That's one of my classic things. Yeah, asking all those questions, you get to a point where you just ask an overwhelming amount of questions, and that gets a response too.
I love that story. The first time you told it, listeners who've been with the show for all this time will probably remember as well. But it's such a beautiful story because you exasperated this young man that you were working with that day when you finally asked him what his favorite Beatle was, and he practically had a meltdown. Like, what does it have to do with anything?
And that started the conversation. In fact, it
It
was the first
started the
words he
conversation.
spoke, basically. So
And that's the point, yeah, because up until that point, he wasn't willing to say anything. He finally said something because he was
he was like,
exasperated.
"Why is this crazy man asking me about what my favorite Beatle is?" And the funny part of it, we had a really good session from that point on. And his mom texted me afterwards and said, "I don't know what you did, but he wants to have another session." And he told me to tell you Japanese. I don't know what that means.
I love it. I love it so much. All right, I think we've done justice to this topic, and so I want to thank you for going through it in depth, like we always do. But I like going through this one in depth. I'm hoping that maybe there might have been somebody who needed a little shakeup on their own perspective, who might have seen it, because if they can get themselves to just let go a little bit, boy, it's amazing what happens when you do.
And it does. And there's a concept, Abraham Hicks talks a lot about the art of allowing. You
Mm.
know, this includes allowing other people to have their perspective, allow them to be. Mel Robbins wrote the book, The Let Them Theory. Allow them, let them, and let them have their. When you understand that, I am not harmed by another person's perspective. That's and so I don't need to defend mine, and especially the more comfortable I become, and great. I've had people say, well, that what you think is sort of crazy, and I go, yeah, it is sort of right. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to defend it. I don't need to defend it. I love. I spent years getting to this point in perspective. It's evolved, and in a year I might have a little different version of it as well. I'm always evolving with this.
I can't wait to find out what your perspective next year is going to be. I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be
yeah.
cool.
Hopefully, it's great.
Thank you very much, my friend. Look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Want to get your question answered here on the show? Just visit loatoday.net, and right at the top of the page, you'll see where you can upload a video or just type in a question, and your question will get answered here on the show. For more on this, listen to the entire podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.